Thank you. Well, hello, everybody. It's actually, when I was looking back at the last time we had the full Instructional Policy Committee meeting, we were in the middle of graduations. We were in the middle of honoring, setting up how we were going to honor our students. We were closing out grades. There was a heck of a lot going on. And that feels like about 6 months ago, I think, compared to, where we are now, where everything really has shifted, as I talked about last time, on looking at how to reopen summer school, which is part of the recovery kind of plans. And then we've actually been able to pause for half a minute and had some meetings about the middle school transformation plan that we were, right on track up till March 14th to bring the middle school transformation, the master plan that's going to be kind of an addendum to our overarching College and Career Academy master plan. And we were all set to bring that through and have a retreat with the board. And then all that kind of blew up. And the team, the executive committee actually met and looked at the timeline. And so I'd like to talk to you about that today as well, just to get your feedback on how we should bring that back through the board through the summer and hopefully have some kind of approval to move forward by the start of school. That would be the actual goal. Because of the number of kind of items to talk about, just sort of the strategic mapping out the reopening and recovery and the middle school master plan, I didn't pull other items off of the board, what we think is coming to the board. All of that's not out yet, but I really kind of left that blank so that we could spend the bulk of the time talking about both the middle school reopening or the middle school transformation plan and the reopening plan, if that sounds okay with all of you. Does that sound good?
Yep, sounds good.
Okay.
Yes.
So why don't we tackle first, under the College and Career Academy, you have a usual in the board docs, an update from the College and Career Academy office and kind of the pre-K through 12 programming. I hope you do take a look at it and maybe pull out one or two things to showcase, because even though we were remote and virtual, the College and Career Academy office and our CTE teachers got incredibly creative on how to bring the partners and the students still together through the end of the year. And ways to continue to work towards industry credentials. And that's outlined in the updates. So it's nice to see that we were able to, even though we weren't allowed to bring students in for regular instruction, they were able to still go out and do some activities either virtually or in a limited way out in a salon or someplace like that as things have opened. So that was really helpful. So be sure you take a look at that. I also wanted to showcase Kenmore Garfield. They hosted virtual university bus trips, and they went to Kent State, University of Akron, and Stark State, or the University of Akron and Stark State, I guess, was on this list. So they did these virtual bus trips. So it's another just good example of how creative our high schools got with our academy coaches on making sure that this group of students didn't lose out on what normally would have happened with their regular college visits. For the freshman group that we typically do, they were still able to get some of those in. And so there's nice examples on how they described what happened during the virtual bus trips. So thinking about our college and career academies, we have our middle school transformation plan is pretty much, was pretty much done prior to March 14th. We were just working out a little bit on the timeline pieces and some of the budget items. And if you remember, we had a beautiful chart that showed each board meeting and each instructional policy committee meeting, and kind of mapped out exactly how we were going to step through. And we had, at that point, we had actually put in a request to hold a retreat like we did for the high school. What the team, the executive committee did this morning is they kind of went through that timeline, and including not just the timeline for board approval, but the timeline for also the timeline for implementation for the 5 years, and identified what were things that maybe we wouldn't be able to fully accomplish next year, so that maybe we would have to make adjustments to the tactical plan, or at least they kind of highlighted what might need to be adjusted. And they want to work this next month to go back and convene the tactical teams from the master planning team, take a look at those highlighted areas that may or may not be able to be accomplished this next year. For some of the things, if they can't accomplish a professional development, for example, I'll give you one concrete example that they'll have to talk through. The inquiry-based learning team had kind of a 3-stage training plan. One this year would have been some additional teaming that would have been this spring, and then going into the fall, that then would have gone into integrated content teaching and learning, where they learn how to take the standards across English and math, for example, or English and social studies, and start to look at how they can do projects collaboratively, using both standards and having lessons that cross content like that. And they would have been trained on all of that. And then the subsequent year would have gotten into problem-based learning. Well, if any of that sequence gets disrupted, we can't really go into the other things, because it's very intentionally built on making sure everyone knows how to operate and be effective in teaming as teachers and learners first. Then it goes into integrated content. Then it goes into problem-based learning. So those are the types of things they identified today to go back to the tactical teams to talk to and make any revisions to their tactical plans. That would happen the end of June into the middle of July. And then they were recommending that they would like to bring the master plan to the board in August. Now, they didn't go date by date, and I'd love for us to do that now, so that we can kind of identify what makes sense for us. And so they'd like to have the recommendations back to the superintendent by the end of July, and then bring the entire master plan with these revisions in August. So let me kind of pause there for a second. Does that overarching plan make sense? And do you have any questions about what that will look like before we actually try to look at the calendar and maybe identify what process? And then we also need to talk about how do we originally had planned a retreat to bring the information to the board, a retreat, or we were going to kind of take a larger chunk of a regular board meeting, which I think both would be okay, but we have to think about just the context of other things we have happening with the board this summer. So I'll pause for a second. What do you think, and what feedback do you have so far?
So I think I can speak a little bit to it just because I have really strong memories of when we did this with the high school transformation. I think that retreat or that special meeting was crucial to understanding beyond, what we cover in committee for the rest of the board. I think that it was such a big switch that, I just remember sitting there and there were so many questions, and there were, logistical questions on top of financial questions on top of, all those pieces. I know that we have a really tight time frame because we're looking at recovery and reopening, and we're also looking at discussions about a levy. So we already have a lot of meetings on the calendar. So at the risk of adding another, I feel like that was just so crucial to a deeper understanding, even for those of us who'd had some, who'd seen your office with the, with everything strapped on the walls and everything that you had, and, had followed along. It still helps so much to have all 7 of us sit together and talk about it with the team.
Right. When it's really, you don't have to worry about 50 other topics that are on the agenda.
Absolutely. It just, it didn't get diluted. It was our biggest focus for that meeting.
Right.
I agree. And because there's so many questions around it, I think it would be good to devote like a sufficient amount of time for us to talk about it and ask questions so that we can field them out in the community. But to Lisa's point, we do have a lot of meetings on the calendar. I wonder if we could do another early morning or something that doesn't get in the way of everyone else's day, where like we did with the academy rollouts, maybe something early in the morning.
That would be, I kind of like, I like those meetings where, if that works for everybody's schedule, to do it before the day starts, just so that we don't have any conflicts and people seem to get on there, and then, then we just get super focused right on the one topic. I think that would be fine.
We could do a breakfast meeting, just everybody has to bring their own breakfast.
Right. Yeah, if we're still, in August, if we're still doing virtual then, or we, maybe we're in 10 North Main by August and everybody spaces out in a big conference room, that might be what we're doing in August. We'll see. So if we look at, I was just pulling up, we have regular board meetings August 10th and August 24th. So if we tried to do, if we could either try to do like a special board meeting right after August 10th, or we could do it right before. And then depending on the number of questions, we could either target the 10th for approval if there's not a lot of outstanding things that we have to go figure out. Or we could go to the 24th if there were some questions we needed to report back on the 10th and then vote on the 24th. This one, just so you know, and some of you were a part of the, sitting in on team meetings or hearing regular updates through instructional policy earlier in the year, the structural changes are not as substantial as high school. So we're not recommending, a complete redesign around specific careers like we did at the high school. We'll be taking some additional steps towards teaming, but most of our middle schools are already doing that. So we'll just be kind of finishing that by grade levels. And then the rest of it is more programming and linkages to the community and having that structure. So it's not quite the, expansive redesign as the high school. The budget impact won't be as, detailed, as substantial that it was at the high school. So it'll be it should be able to, one special meeting, I think, should do it. Maybe answering some questions kind of at the next meeting, and then we would be able to get approval. So do you think having the special meeting before August 10th, Mr. Bravo? And I'm so glad you're on this call so that we can look at, not that we have to decide right now, but just what I'll do is, based on our discussion, I'll just talk to the superintendent and put out a recommendation that maybe at the scrimmage meeting, we can kind of go through to see if that makes sense in light of everything else that's on the calendar this summer. So we'd be looking at something around that first week of August. And if not, it would be, between the 10th and the 24th would be the next option. And then whichever one of those works best based on other things that are on our calendar, we also need to start to talk about a dedication ceremony, something. The executive committee this morning talked about wanting, probably by that time, if we want to do it around the board approval, that we could probably do some kind of virtual ceremony, but we would want Ford Next Generation here. We'd want the Akron Community Foundation, who's been a huge part of the middle school transformation, as well as all of our other key partners. So we would put together some kind of dedication ceremony, but we can certainly do it virtual, or we could wait until, who knows when we can get together. But as you all know, that could be, for us to actually have a lot of people together, that could be months and months and months away. So the team this morning recommended just putting together some very creative virtual celebration that could then be open, but including all of those partners. What do you think? Now that you all have attended some virtual, and I know lots of organizations are doing them too, what do you think?
I think it's the best way to do it right now. I especially if you have all the community partners there, and I don't know. I don't think it's safe enough to have big groups of people together yet.
Right.
I agree.
Okay. So we could try end of August, beginning of September, kind of launch the school year with the new plan. It would be, I bet it also would signify some normalcy for us, which would be really nice to say, we're not letting COVID kick us off the bigger plan of transformation and alignment. And we've made some adjustments, but we're able to move forward with the bigger plan. Because there's absolutely no reason for us to, to wait a whole year. When they went through this morning, there's a number of things that we could do this next year, regardless of the school model, I think.
I think so too. And I think the kids even need to have some sense of normalcy, because everything is so uncertain right now, that to have something move forward as planned, I think is a good thing. I think everybody needs that right now. Oh, we had a plan and it's moving forward as we thought. Good. Wonderful.
Yeah, and we knew that if you recall, the way the partnerships would work at the middle school is the tactical team that worked on all of the community engagement part and the partnership piece. It'll be focused on a nonprofit, social service, governmental agency group of partners with a little bit of business, but we're really trying to keep the business partnerships at the high school and do more of the nonprofit, social service, governmental agencies at the middle school, with more of a slant towards service learning type projects that'll still be the big, problem-based learning units, but it'll be giving back somehow to the community which is why the nonprofits work so beautifully in that space. Well, we know it'll take some time to build the partnerships and to identify people and get out to folks to be able to explain the way that this is going to work. So if we waited a whole nother year, then it would take us a year to get the partnerships. Now we're talking a couple of years away, when we know we could do this fall. We could really start laying some groundwork to start linking up our schools and do kind of the behind the scenes technical pieces. And then even the second semester start to do projects and match up the middle schools with the providers. So I think all that part would make sense for us to just keep moving forward and not miss a beat with that. All right, so I wrote down special board meeting before August 10th, as long as that looks okay with the rest of the different board meetings, the way they're being scheduled through the summer. And then that would give us August 10th and August 24th. We'd figure out which one of those makes sense for the official bringing it for consideration and approval. And then after the 24th, then we'd look within the next probably 2 weeks after that to set up a dedication ceremony so that we don't wait too long. So that'll be right at the beginning of the year. I think that'd be great.
I do
Any,
too.
okay, good. Okay, the next topic is the I Promise School Master Plan. There's updates here as well, similar to what I said about the College and Career Academy. This update is really focused on launching the next school year and what that is going to look like. They've been interviewing teachers and focusing on the staffing for the next grade levels, and what they've proposed to the superintendent right now, since they start so early. July 27th is when the students are scheduled to come back. This really is going to give us an opportunity to, once we bring a plan to the board for a school model recommendation, they really will be able to work through that plan prior to, everybody else, every other school. So we'll be able to see, how does the social distancing work? How does the transportation work? How does it work coming in and out of the school so that kids aren't passing each other and we're not having large crowds at the same time and using multiple entrances. All of those logistics that we are mapping out, and I'm so glad you've been able to sit in on some of those sessions. We'll be able to really work through a lot of that through IPS. They'll be bringing in a new grade level this year, like we've done each year. They bring in a new class of third graders, so now they'll have 3rd through 6th this year. And they've proposed to the superintendent to bring in, to kind of stagger how they bring them in at the beginning. And we have to wait until the ODE guidance still isn't out for reopening. We're hoping that we get it this week, so that we can then bring a recommendation to the board once we see those. And Ms. McKittrick and Mrs. Mansfield, you've heard me say to the large reopening team that we expected the guidance a couple weeks ago and then last week, and now we're hoping it comes this week, and if not, by next week. And then we will bring to the board, the formal plan to reopen. IPS wants to bring in the returning students first, the 4th through 6th grade, so that they can come back and actually be with their last year's teacher, to kind of have closure for that first few days of school, to be able to.
That's nice.
Yeah, because you think about how we left in March face to face. I mean, it was like pack up your things. We were thinking we were just going to be off for a few weeks, and then all of a sudden we're off, the rest of the year.
I love
So they really,
I love that those kids will get to reconnect with their teachers. I think that's wonderful.
yeah, they wanted to give them an opportunity and bring in, half the 4th through 6th graders on one day to get that closure, and then the other half to keep the numbers down on the next day. And then the 3rd day of school would be the new 3rd graders get to come in, the half of the 3rd graders, and then the following day would be the other half of 3rd graders would come in. So it'll be staggered start before they get into some, however we finally put together a staggered type schedule to make sure that we've got the appropriate number of kids, the reduced number of kids in each class, whatever that it turns out to be when we see the ODE guidance. Right now, we've been figuring, as you heard us talk about in the reopening, we've been figuring it'll be about 12 kids per class to keep the 6 feet social distancing. So as long as that's what comes from the Ohio Department of Ed and the Department of Public Health, when we see the final guidance, we can adjust up and down if that number changes a little bit based on the guidance. So I love the way that IPS mapped that out, and the superintendent is taking their plan into consideration, and we'll be sending that to our local Department of Public Health soon here so that they can sign off, since that'll be the first school coming back. That's going to come up very fast, as you can imagine. So we'd like to get, within the next week or so, we'd like to get all that approved so then they can start planning for that.
I actually was listening today to the press conference the governor held, and he said he was publicly releasing it at the press conference in 10 days. So hopefully that means you get a hold of it before then. I mean, I know that they were talking about closing, and then during the press conference, David was still on a phone call and they closed us without, saying, hey, we're going to today. So, but he said in 10 days. So I'm sure the press will hold him to that. So
that's what the 26th. So that's the end. We originally, and you heard me say this to the large reopening and recovery team, that we were hoping to bring a recommendation to the board on the 22nd. And then the superintendent just talked to me this week and said, we do have a special board meeting on the 29th. Maybe we, assuming we'd get the ODE guidance this week, then maybe we could do the 29th. If we don't get it till that Friday, the 26th, that's going to be tough, because that just gives us the weekend to use that guidance against all the tactical plans that we have so far. Let me look here at the next, the 20, and then we have, it's not till the 13th is our next board meeting, July 13th. So we'll have to look at that. I think they're trying to wait to see what happens with the cases since all the other reopening happened, so that they can watch to see if there's a spike, and then that will help inform the guidance that they'll provide for reopening. But boy, to wait until July 13th to have firm plans, that's getting real late in our world, as you can imagine. So
we have one July 1st too. It's supposed to be a levy one.
Maybe we could do that.
We have the 29th and the 1st on the calendar right now.
Yeah, if we're able to get a preview of what might be coming out, since David is so involved at state level meetings, if we're able to get a preview, maybe we could turn it around by the 29th, over that weekend. If it's not released till that Friday, the 26th, we may be able to do that. But the 1st might be great to target that, at least just to get it in your hands, and then we can work through any details. And we may be able to, on the 29th, some of the other tactical teams like the athletics and extracurricular, those are pretty, those are not as complicated as the school model plan, as you know. The athletics is pretty well set because of the Ohio High School Athletic Association really has a lot of provisions that they have to follow. And so we can probably get those to you no matter what on the 29th, because those, I don't think those will dramatically change. And some of the other logistics, just about how we'll be cleaning the buildings and those things will probably not change either from the state guidance. So I will put down the 29th or the 1st based on, I was not on that call, so I'm glad you were listening to the governor, because that certainly confirms needing to use the 29th versus the 22nd if it's not
They
coming.
ask about it at every meeting. I mean, at every press conference, they ask about
Probably won't be able to get back to you.
K-12. So I try
Okay.
to have one ear on it whenever he's on.
And he said in 10 days, right?
He repeated it more than once.
Okay. So the 26th is when we'll hope for it. Okay.
He did stress just you know, how localized this is going to be too, which I thought was helpful, and how what one district or even one school within a district does may not be the same, so that people should be ready for that. So I'm glad that they're starting to put that out there.
Yeah, I think that actually will be very helpful for us to be able to know how unique each district is. I'm hoping that the counties, like the neighboring counties, if they do let some of the county Department of Public Health make some decisions on some of that guidance, that I'm hoping they're pretty consistent, because I do think it would be complicated if neighboring counties, have different, like if we have more restrictions than Stark County, for example, or vice versa, how that will be hard to communicate to parents and families why one district right next door can go to school full time and have all the kids there, and then the next, and we can't, or the other way around. Either way, the inconsistency by county would be really rough. So I'm hoping the basic framework is the same, and then after that, let everything else be kind of a local decision.
We lost Lisa.
Oh, did we? Oh, shoot.
She was, yeah, I don't know what happened.
It looks like Mr. Bravo,
Yeah,
he maybe just clicked off.
a little
yeah.
bit ago, but I don't know.
But why don't we wait to see if Lisa comes back on?
Yeah.
I did want to.
It makes sense. Because I've already had emails about opening up, and well, I think you probably saw them that were sent to the board and the superintendent, and some of them are, I don't know why we're not having our kids all back like we always would, and then others don't want their kids to be there at all, and then of course the mix of those in between somewhere. So
right.
I'm not willing to take a chance with anyone's children. Let me just say that. I'm going to err on the side of caution every time. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Hello, Mrs. Mansfield, but I know we lost you for a second there. Can you hear us okay?
Yes, I'll dial right back in if I get knocked off. I have to move around for a minute in the house, and you know how that is.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay.
I'm
That's
so
all
sorry.
right. Okay. I do want to, you're not at your computer, Mrs. Mansfield, are you?
I am not at the moment, but I can be.
Well, that's okay. I will email this to you. I just wanted to show just for a second but I will email this out also. Before we moved off of the IPS schedule, I wanted to just sort of remind you what years we have for what grades coming. So the chart, and you're used to seeing this, Mrs. Mansfield, it was in the master plan. And then we did revise it from the, originally we were thinking we'd add first grade too, but then we decided to go 3rd through 8th grade after the first year. So the step-by-step chart shows 2021, which we're going into, we'll have 3rd through 6th. And then the following year will be 21-22 school year, we'll have 3rd through 7th. And then in 2022-23, will be fully, will be done. That'll be 3rd through 8th grade then. So we're 3 more years away from being full capacity at the I Promise school. I just wanted to remind you, but I'll be sure to email this to you too, just so you have it in front of you.
Thank
All right.
you.
And then the last topic, we really kind of started diving right into it just from the IPS discussion about the reopening and the recovery. The only other part of recovery is the, what are we going to do for the instructional recovery? We've spent a lot of time talking about the health and safety issues, the, what those guidelines are going to be about the 6 feet distance, if that sticks. What does that mean? What the transportation guidelines may look like that will impact how we can bring kids in and out to school. When you think about the instructional recovery, that also we look at how do we recover any lost content and make sure we know where kids are as soon as they start back to school, and then what services are we providing through the year to help fill any gaps. One of the most important things, and Mrs. McKittrick and I were just talking about this when we lost you for a minute, Mrs. Mansfield, for the way we're trying to build the school models is to really have families have choice. No matter what, and we want to say this a million times over, we want to make sure families know that there will be an option, 100% remote option available to every single parent. Even if the governor were to say in 10 days, if he were to say that you could go back with 0 restrictions, even if he said you could go back full time, we have an online school program called APS Online, and we will continue to have that. And we can accommodate as many students as we want to, and whose parents step up and say, I would much prefer during this next year to have my students stay online. Or there may be families that found that their kids thrived during this online and they want to have their students continue in that mode. We have APS Online, and we will continue to have that this next year. And in July, we are going to start to ask, once the board approves the reopening plan, we will immediately go to families individually and ask every family to let us know whether they want to send their student in whichever model the board approves, to say, yes, this is how we're going to come back. Or the families will say, no, I want them 100% remote, and then we'll accommodate that and staff for that. So I think that's really, really important, and there's going to be a lot of districts talking now, as well as in our own plans, once we get the guidance, we'll be able to finalize those. But if it's a staggered type schedule, if it's, younger grades coming full day, whatever the way that we're able to bring kids in and out, no matter what, we will have an online option that families can choose to keep their kids 100% remote. And we will have, by the beginning of July, we'll have a description of what that will look like and what the expectations will be for that APS online. And I think that's going to be the marketing and the communication, and I'll need a lot of guidance from the two of you on what that should look like for us to be able to make sure that families have a very well-informed decision when we ask them. Probably by the second week in July, we're going to need to know their intentions so that we can start staffing for that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yes.
So I think I started mentioning it. I mentioned it at the last meeting. I think that as we talk about the recovery and restart program, as Valerie and I report out about that instructional policy, if we can just continue to mention that even before there's a plan, I don't think it hurts. I don't know who's listening. Jennifer hasn't written about it, but Mark can work magic with that. We just need to just keep saying it, just like lots of other things. You just keep saying it until somebody hears it.
Right.
Sharing online too.
Yeah, there's a number of school programs, charter schools that are advertising right now that we don't want families to think that if they want to keep their kids online, that they have to go do some other type program. Because the advantage for us is for our own program, and we have about 250 kids that were in that program this past year, either full-time or part-time, were taking courses through APS online. The advantage for us is that it can be full-time, but then you can still come in and do, if you want to do sports, you can still come in and do sports. If we're able to have kids come in to do projects even, or CTE programs, they can come in and do it that way. We have tutoring kind of supports that the kids can come in. And so staying with our online programming is 100 times better than going to a charter where, the teachers are in some other state and they don't have the face-to-face options that you can take advantage of that you can with us. So the more we can say that and communicate that as families are making choices, the better. And I love that you brought it up the last time. That's for sure.
Here's the other thing. Please feel free to share, let me share my story, or you share my story. You have my permission to, talk about how that worked for Teddy. We don't have to name him. We can just say one of our board members. I had 3 kids. One I'm trying to figure out which one it was. But I don't mind sharing that. The graduate Nick that just had me give him his diploma at Ellett, that's the program we put together for Nick with Rachel Tecca, where he did online and credit recovery and CTE, and he got to, he walked in with his class. And so there's, and I've got a couple stories like that where we didn't let people quit. And so this is just, now that I've seen that work, I'm perfectly willing to share that story, as broadly as you want it shared.
Part of the marketing piece that we talked about trying to do around this was to do testimonials like that, to kind of showcase a student or a family and say, here's the way that we made choices and here's how we took advantage of the APS online, to personalize it rather than just a list of offerings, to really hear some kids' stories and to personalize it that way, I think would be great. So we'll definitely.
Well, and I think Yeah, and Nick's family would be more than willing to share that, you know, and he and Teddy are completely different stories, right? I mean, Teddy's was for the arts,
Yeah.
and he went on to go to college, and Nick was for automotive, and he got a job the day before he graduated that's a full-time job at an auto shop. So I mean, their stories are completely diverse, and I'm sure that there are dozens like them. But
Right.
I think that sharing the depth of the difference in those stories is huge.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so too. I think that would be great. So
Yeah, absolutely.
the more we can talk about that, and I know you all got to, you know, see the options that we're really trying to work through number-wise, on how we bring the different grade levels in, this next year, depending, again, for the 500th time that I say this, depending on the final guidance that we have to work within, will really dictate how we can bring kids back. But the how we staff is going to be really important. We know we have some staff who are not going to be able to come in because of health conditions. And so the quicker we can find out how many families are going to choose remote, we can also match up with our faculty where they could accommodate the expansion of our APS online and our 100% remote kids. We can match that up pretty easily, and then figure out based on ODE's guidance the rest of the students on how they come in and on what kind of schedule. So that's the plan, all within days.
Hours.
A complete redesign of you know, the school in a short amount of time. But it's actually, I actually feel pretty confident. You know, there's been times over the past few weeks that it's like this is a lot, but I think you know, I think each of to have 140 some people working on this was really helpful, and to have 8 different teams kind of hammer out the recommendations. We're learning a lot. I think I told you just through the athletics team and bringing the kids back and what that looks like. How do you do that safely? Which is one of the harder things to bring kids back because they're, you know, they're sweating and they're physical, you know, they want to be physical. So if we've been able to work through that nicely during this past week and a half now, that we're learning a lot there. So there's enough of these smaller groups coming in that I think are really helpful. The last thing that I wanted to just mention to you is I started to talk about the instructional recovery piece and looking at the type of summer programming. And I will email you, since Mrs. Mansfield, you're not in front of your computer, I'll email both of these to you that describe, you know, normally at a board meeting, and we can still do this at the next board meeting if you want. And if we can even have it a part of our committee presentation. You know, normally when we're face to face, we have one meeting where Mary Otley Kelly and Mark Black talk through summer school and summer programming. And we have a chart that explains, here's what we're offering for elementary and here's what we're doing for secondary. And part of it is the superintendent agreed to expand offerings, even though they're all virtual. He agreed to expand the offerings to try to pick up more students and get more support for elementary in particular, so that we can really take advantage of every day through the school year. So we're doing a early launch program, which is similar to pre-fall, but it's open to a broader group of kids. It's open to all students going into grades 1 through 4, so that they can really hone and focus in on particularly their literacy skills, but there'll be fun kind of enrichment activities as well that will go along with that. And that'll be for 4 weeks, July 20th through August 14th. And I was going to cast it for you, but I'll send this to you so that you can see it. And then we can talk about whether we then distribute this as part of the next board meeting. And then we also are doing a program that's starting this week all the way through August 14th, where teachers will actually monitor students on the literacy and math program called iReady that we have, that is an individualized digital software tool that focuses on reading and math skills. And there'll be challenges through the year, but teachers will be monitoring how kids are doing on that and encouraging kids to meet their own personalized goals. And that's for kids going into grades 1 through 6. And so that's a whole, 10-week type program that we're hoping. And we've never done this where teachers are actually hired to help support and monitor kids. Normally, we've just said, it's good for you to go in and do your lessons and be sure you do X, Y, and Z. This is a more targeted approach, but it's open to any student grades 1 through 6. And then there's some other reading challenges that we're doing all the way for the next 2 months as well. It'll be online. It'll be grades 1 through 12. So we're trying to take advantage of this virtual moment and have kids stay connected during this whole summer, so that every minute that they're doing something this summer will help recover any loss that they had this spring. And that's kind of our goal, to give a number of different things. Akron After School is doing their own normal enrichment type things, but those are all virtual as well. And each time we do virtual, we're able to actually reach sometimes more kids than we can in the face-to-face. So we'll see how many kids we get participating. I'll be able to give you kind of reports through the summer, since we're able to, because these are all digital software, we can see what kids are completing through the summer. And then secondary is all focused on credit recovery type items, and the middle school is doing the reading challenge. That's all the way up through 12th grade. Okay, but what do you think about distributing the charts that show here's what elementary and here's what secondary are offering? And we could link to the website where the information's located too. You want to do that as part of your committee report, or would you rather just focus on some of the reopening? Except it is all connected, because this is all part of the reopening and recovery piece.
Right. No, I think we should mention this stuff as well, because I think people, again, the more they hear it, the better.
Yeah.
I don't think you can say it enough, especially for the parents who are worried that their kids have slipped and might need that extra help.
Yeah. Yeah, you never know who's listening.
Yeah, I agree.
Because we've done all calls, we've been sending stuff home, but no matter what, it's like the more we can talk about it, the next person hears it and passes it along, that'll be great.
Absolutely.
The other piece is, when I was up at North the other day, they were talking to me about how much the food program has, I don't know if I need to reach out to Mark and see what the numbers are citywide. And I don't know if North was a big hub anyway, but they were telling me that I'm sure the need hasn't gone down, but the amount of kids showing up has. So maybe stressing in general to parents how many things, and the community, how many things are really going on over the summer, food wise and in this summer school, just kind of showing both.
Okay. We could also show, we haven't done this quite a bit and board meetings, so I'd have to talk to David if he's okay logistically, but being able, on the Chromebooks now, as kids open them up now, the landing page has changed that automatically puts you to the summer launch page, so that kids are sort of forced every time they open their Chromebook, the summer school, all the different offerings and activities and challenges are all right there. So we do that so that they don't have to go anywhere. You open it up and it's going to be right in front of you every single day in the summertime. So we could show that in the next board meeting too, to just show families what that landing page looks like, that it's very easy to get to and all the offerings are right there. And the challenges and the activities that kids just click right in and go do it. Similar to how we did the first few weeks of school when we switched to APS connected learning, the way we did it that way.
I love that.
Absolutely.
All right, well, I will talk to the superintendent about that and see if we can get that part of the agenda.
That sounds good to me.
So that is all I had. Do you have any topics, questions, concerns?
I think that's enough.
I know. It's exhausting. Right.
Yeah, I tell you what, I've really enjoyed being on and jumping around the calls for the recovery and restart. Just listening
Good.
to all the bits and pieces and watching things in real time get resolved, or listening to them get resolved. And it's the one, and I'll stress this in the meeting as well, just the positivity of everyone. There's nobody saying, well, that just won't work. And everybody is, the attitudes are just fantastic.
Yeah.
So thank you for allowing us to be on that, because I think that's gone a long way to just when I feel like, oh my gosh, I'm so overwhelmed. And that's just a fraction of what you guys must feel. But just, it's such an overwhelming task, and just being able to hear the pieces kind of fall into place, and they're not falling into place. Who am I kidding? They're getting knocked into place.
Right.
But
Yeah,
it makes me feel better.
It's a testament to the quality of the people that we have.
Absolutely.
I don't know that many districts that can say, okay, let's bring 140 people together in a 5-week time period and have these 8 teams, and without a ton of oversight. I mean, it was just like, you guys, here's the things you have to go figure out. Here's the topics, go figure it out, go forth. And they all figured it out. They came back. I think we had 1 meeting of the chairs to kind of touch base, and that's it. They've really been able to pull it all together. And as I've been putting all the recommendations, in one document that we'll give to you all, the board, it's all coming together beautifully. There's certainly things we're going to have to figure out the next 2 months, but at least we have a plan and we know exactly what has to be accomplished. And that's always the worst thing for me as the chief academic officer, is when I don't have the plan. That's the hard part, when it's all this just, it's a blob of a million things that have to get accomplished. But once it all gets put together in a systematic kind of plan, and we know what do we already know and can recommend, what do we have to figure out, then that's all doable. We really do have amazing people that can put together a heck of a lot of information and put things in place in a very short amount of time.
It is remarkable. That is remarkable when you think of what's been accomplished, all the different components that had to fall into place or get knocked into place, as Lisa said, and it did.
Yeah. And I say this a lot, and I hope it doesn't sound like, it's overuse this, but one of the huge advantages especially when you go through, when you're in a crisis kind of mode, is when you have the consistency and leadership kind of deeply like we do, we can pretty much finish each other's sentences, and we know who can do what in terms of strengths and their gifts and who are the nuts and bolts people. And like, once you know that, boy, things are they just move and they just happen because we work together through so many things. And we all just know who can pick up what and who can finish every detail. And it works like a science. So I'm blessed, especially during this time. I wouldn't want to have any other team, surrounding me. And the teacher leaders were fabulous through this whole process. So it worked well.
It's phenomenal. It really is.
It is.
So that's all I have. I think what you should expect from me is a calendar that I'll work with the superintendent and the president of the board just to match up the dates for the middle school transformation. And then we'll figure out to make sure we can introduce the summer school things and take a little time just to do that. Not a big time, but as part of our committee, and maybe we could cast it and share the website, which I think would be helpful.
Good.
Okay.
Yeah, that sounds great.
All right. Thank you very much.
As always,
Thanks, everybody.
thank you for everything you do. Take care, everyone.
Okay, sure. Thank you. Thanks, Ryan.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.